Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to episode number 6 of Hot for Teacher, which is, if you don't already know, a write-in relationship advice show. It's a spin-off of the fairly popular, deep niche call-in tabletop RPG game mastering advice show, Office Hours. But instead of talking about RPGs, we talk about sweet, sweet lovin', and also friendship and sex stuff and all kinds of other exciting things. Whatever you want to talk about. And how I know what you want to talk about is that you go to my website, www.adam-cole.com. You click on the Hot for Teacher link. You ogle a cute picture of me, and then you fill in a form. And then I use that form's information to tell me what the episode should be about. It's a good relationship. I like it. I hope you like it. Feels good. It feels good. What I want to do before we get into today's episode is just remind you that the purpose of Hot for Teacher, is not only to specifically answer individual people's questions about relationship stuff, but to begin a conversation about these sorts of things. One of the best things is when folks talk about the topics of Hot for Teacher in the chat or on the YouTube comments or in the Math Squad Discord or wherever you like to have conversations. So I'm going to encourage you, whatever it is that I end up talking about today, whatever I say, whatever gets under your skin, use this as a starting point to have a larger conversation about the relationships that you have in your life, the relationships you hope to have in your life, and other people's relationships. All right? So don't treat this as the only thing there is, because it isn't. Let's begin today talking about solve for X. So Oliver asks, Adam, what's your prediction for the how do I solve X interpersonal drama question from Office Hours for this show? What's the one question you expect to see in every episode, but wearing a different hat each time? So the reason this is a question, and the thing that prompted this show in the first place was the fact that many, so very many, of the questions that I got asked on Office Hours ended up being boiled down to a couple of really simple things. In the context of tabletop role-playing games, most problems can be solved by the judicious application of just like a couple of pieces of advice, right? Talk to your players, meaning treating your fellow role players like they're human beings first and half-elven fighter mages second. Having conversations with them openly and honestly as people and working out outside the game structure what is or isn't working for everybody at the table. Play the right game, meaning that not all rule sets, settings, or scenarios are fun and engaging for everybody. That you might want to play a game with lots of rules, but your players might be looking for something a little less complex. Half your group might want sci-fi, and your other half might want fantasy. Picking the right game means finding the game that works for everyone. And then lastly, I would advise all the time, over and over, episode to episode, play with the right people. Sometimes the first two questions or the first two bits of advice don't help you solve your problems. Nobody should be expected to compromise the things they want or need for the sake of the group. And that might mean that you need to ask someone not to be part of your campaign, or you might have to leave and find another group. And all of these form, for me, the basis of good play. If you can do these successfully, almost everything else is just specific minutia and practice. Now, they're really good ideas in relationships, too. And actually, I think, serve as a pretty good base for most of my advice here as well on Hot for Teacher. I mean, let's look at them in a different context, shall we? So if we take away the specific stuff of playing a role-playing game, we can apply these same pieces of advice to any relationship with just a little bit of fine-tuning. So talk to your players becomes talk to the people that you're in relationships with. And not just like have steady communication, but be aware of the type of communicating you're doing and what it is that you are communicating about. Many problems between people stem from an inability to express what we need in a way that can be understood, or from an ability or inability to hear other people when they're trying to tell us what they need. If we're willing to sit down with people and actively talk with them about what's going on for us in a way that's vulnerable and open and unafraid, we stand a much better chance of getting what we need. If we can learn how to express ourselves in a way that has truth and integrity without making demands or giving up on our boundaries, at the absolute very least, we've developed a skill that will get us heard. And that's all anyone can really hope for, right? To be listened to. Now, on the flip side, learning to listen is a huge skill related to building empathy. And there's something absolutely magical about like really hearing a person when they talk, creating a space where they can feel acknowledged and where we're able to engage with their feelings and ideas. There's so much intimacy in a well-developed communication space with a person, and knowing how to communicate and practicing that with kindness and intent, it's basically the most important thing about any healthy relationship. I think a big thing a lot of people get mixed up about in the whole talk to your people thing is the difference between communication and action. Right? A lot of the time we get mixed up about what we're saying and what we expect from people, and freeing yourself from expectation is super important. For example, if someone comes to you and says, when you do the thing, it makes me unhappy, what do you think that they're expressing? Right? Are they telling you how they feel because they want you to understand them? Or do you think they want you to stop doing the thing? When you want something to change and you tell someone who has some control and ability to change that thing, is the expression of your feelings purely that? Or are you attempting to convince them to change something? When you're building communication skills, I find it incredibly helpful to try to work with people to understand the separation between the two. For communication to be real, it has to be purely about the expression of desires, feelings, and needs, not about even a well-meaning attempt to manipulate someone's outcomes. If you communicate to affect specific change and you don't get what you want, it can feel like your communication has failed. When I tell someone how I feel, my only expectation is that they're listening to me. With that foundation, saying something like, I felt sad when you didn't come to my extravagant masquerade ball, isn't about putting guilt on the person who didn't attend my super cool party for cool kids. It's about me and my feelings about that thing. I try my hardest never to expect change just because I'm expressing a feeling. It's about sharing that feeling and talking about it. If there's something that I want, by the same token, I'll ask for it. I will say, please, come to my extravagant masquerade ball. And if they say yes and they come, then great. If they say no, I can express my disappointment and I can decide how their lack of attendance affects my feelings and opinions about that relationship. The purpose here isn't to stop trying to get what you need, but to inform the people that you're talking with about your needs, to share yourself with them. And listen, even if nobody comes to your stupid party, you've got to be honest with them and with yourself. So to bring that all back to RPGs, this kind of conversation can really benefit a game before it starts. If everybody is honest about their intentions, their hopes and their desires for the game, you're going to end up much better informed about whether the game is going to work. If you are compatible players who can pick a game and pick a style that will please everyone, it's also really useful to be able to check in, right? Keep yourself in a state of practiced communication. It'll mean that you're going to be able to keep being good at it, and it's a skill, right? So you work at skills to get better at them. In the context of relationships, the idea of play the right game has a really clear and obvious parallel too. Some relationships are like Dungeons and Dragons. They follow a time-honored and standardized set of assumptive rules, protocols passed down for decades, with some slight addition changes as the game design has grown. For other people, their relationships are more like Vampire the Masquerade. It's all about the way the relationship feels, except that you're both secretly keeping score, and it's probably got a lot more rules than you pretend that it does. For others, relationships are this homebrew mess where nobody really understands what the rules are, and in the end, nobody's actually playing the same game anyway. It's a silly analogy, I know. But the game here is just the parameters, activities, and space that make up the relationships between people. Most of the time we rely on social and cultural assumptions about relationships, right? D&D has saving throws, XP, and alignment. So most games don't venture too far from that familiar structure. Sure, your game might have different names for these things, but it's probably more or less the same. Most folks never really have the opportunity to question the rules of the relationship that they're in. They're happy just to play Dungeons and Dragons, and that's that. The thing is, there are a lot of other ways to roleplay. Your rule set might be more complex and robust and specific. People in the kink scene, I am looking at you. Or maybe your game is less complex, more improvisational. In a perfect world, well, my perfect world, anyway, we would use our communication skills to work together with the people close to us, our friends, our family members, our other relationships, to determine what rule set we want to use for our relationships. The rules that I prefer in relationships tend to be fairly open and flat and inviting of hacking, right? All of the classes are evenly balanced, and nobody gets any specific advantage over anyone else, regardless of what role they play. Now, there are as many ways to have relationships as there are games to play, and we should work together to figure out what the parameters of our relationships are with people, and then be flexible designers as we go along, hacking and modifying those rules to suit the table, so to speak. And that was a fairly convoluted way to say, play the right game. It's just another way to say, work out the rules for yourself. And finally, play with the right people is very important relationship advice. Be in relationships because you want to be in them with the people you are with. The analogy here, and a thing that pains me deeply every time I see it happen, is the person who plays the same game, which they hate, with the same group that they don't like, because they're afraid they'll never find a group they can play with if they leave. Excuse me. So the thing is here, don't tolerate bullshit for the sake of a friendship or for the sake of a relationship, or for sex, or whatever. You are more important than being with someone, whatever shape that takes. Role-playing games, like relationships, can't be done alone. I mean, unless you're in a relationship with Traveler, I guess. In which case, I mean, good luck and have fun shipping unobtainium back and forth across the universe by yourself. Just because you want to play a game doesn't mean you should just play whatever game comes along with whoever happens to be at hand. If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with is bullshit advice. fuck that. If you can't be with the one you love, don't be with anyone. Or change what you need. I think people ought to look at relationships as a byproduct of the people and the structures that make up a life. They are the emergent property of known quantifiable qualities. Seek excellent qualities, and your outcomes will emerge delightful. So to answer your question, Oliver, which I didn't really do yet, I think that the fundamental questions for this show are more or less the same as they are for office hours. Or from another perspective, role-playing games are a specific kind of relationship. And the advice that works for them works for all relationships, if we boil it down. Time will tell us what the repeating patterns are here, but if you're looking for a sort of flip prediction, it seems to me that folks are eager to learn how to make new friends, how to better understand or be understood by the people in their lives, and then like sex stuff, which we haven't had a ton of yet, but it's coming. So I don't know. We'll just have to stay tuned and see what the patterns are. Maybe they'll surprise us. Question two comes to us from Michael. It is a slightly truncated version of Michael's question. Michael offered some personal stuff in the middle of the question, but I wanted to cut to the... This is a thing that ends up having... If you see your question on Hot for Teacher and I've cut some stuff, it's because a lot of you send me a lot of text for your questions, which I understand. You want to give me context. But it's fascinating. The average word count for a Hot for Teacher question over an office hours question it's significant. Anyway, Michael asks, more or less paraphrased, as someone who's involved in an anarchistic relationship, how would you go about proposing the idea to a current partner? Any advice from my favorite internet boy? Well, thank you. Thank you, Michael. So when Michael says an anarchistic relationship, he's referring to a particular style or philosophy of relationships that has some parallels with practical or political anarchist thought that I personally am a subscriber to. So I'll run it down for you right quick. The kind of relationship philosophy that I'm about doesn't recognize any type of relationship as being inherently more valuable or special, nor does it place any inherent value on something like seniority. So a romantic relationship, a friendship, or a relationship that involves sex is all given equal gravity from the get-go. Now, this doesn't mean that all relationships are the same in practice. I definitely have people I like more than others, and I spend more time with people for a bunch of different reasons. And we'll talk about this a bunch more in the third question. But activity, proximity, and just like desiring more time with those people can affect how I spend time with them. It's more that this style of relationships doesn't believe that sex or romance is somehow better or more important than friendship, for example. This sort of flattened structure attempts to remove relationship classes from the equation and create a more level field to stage your human connections from. The other big part of an anarchic relationship model is the idea that everyone in relationships is self-governing, that we don't subscribe to an external structure to tell us what we should want or how we should behave. That just because we are in a relationship doesn't give me any more say over what you do or how you live your life, or vice versa, nor does it give that external perspective any authority over you. We can ask each other for things, but no one goes into a relationship expecting anything that wasn't already agreed upon. It tends to create relationships that are a lot of work because we forget preconceptions about what is or isn't okay. We work together and we create our own specific relationship models. And we talk about our boundaries and our desires on a regular basis to create these custom intimate connections. It's real nice when you can make it work with the right people. In exchange for all the communicating and the talking and the work and the planning, you get to feel free of a lot of obligation and bullshit. Now, this isn't to say that just because we do all this work that there isn't still bullshit. Humans are messy and fallible and they fuck up. But at least we do so outside external pressures that privilege the relationship escalator and assume that sex and love-oriented, monogamous, legally binding pair units are the top of the relationship food chain. So, if monogamy is the apple of relationships, relationship anarchy is the scratch building your own hardware, writing your own operating system, and then constantly patching bugs out, but getting the exact experience you need and want out of it of computing. Nerd analogies. Welcome to Hot for Teacher. If you want to know more about relationship anarchy, my main source and the place where I was exposed to it first is Andy Nordgren's short instructional manifesto for relationship anarchy. You can find that on the internet. Andie Nordgren, as it sounds. Also, someone from my personal circle of humans has videos on her YouTube channel. But there, you can go to relationship-anarchy.com. There's a bunch of information there. So, let us assume, Michael, you have decided that it is time to burn your Hallmark cards and let fly the black flag of love. Now, one thing I'll say about this, and this meaning an anarchic style of relationships, but really also any non-normative philosophy of relationships, it's not necessarily about like having it with a partner. Like, the idea of proposing relationship anarchy to a person is a bit weird because it's not really about them. It's about you. What I've described, unlike, say, I don't know, polyamory, for example, is a more holistic style of relating not just between two people, but to everyone in your life altogether, right? Like if you're going from a monogamous to a non-monogamous place, you're really only changing the way that you relate romantically and or sexually to one person and then potentially other people as related through the lens of that one relationship. And you could do that. But relationship anarchy is about your entire social structure. You can't just have an anarchic relationship with one person necessarily. It's a bigger change. It's a philosophy. And so what you're asking, I think, is about how to talk to a person in your life about the changes you want to make to your own relationship model overall. And that shit can be super scary because not just because cultural pressure tends towards like nesting couple priority, monogamy as normal, and heterosexuality as a baseline, there isn't just the social pressure of the relationship escalator bearing down on you here. The real trick, I think, is that you're asking someone with privilege to give that up for the sake of someone, and maybe lots of someone's happiness and well-being. And that's a really hard thing to convince a person to do, to give up privilege that they currently have, and in a lot of cases didn't do any work for. Just ask all white men everywhere, right? I mention this just because I think that this is a huge thing in social justice, right? For equality of gender, race, or anything else to exist, the people that have privilege and power need to be willing to dispense it to share it to other people. So let's imagine a situation. Now, I don't know your sexual orientation or your relationship situation here, but so I'm going to be as hypothetical as possible. So imagine this. There are two people who are in a sexually and romantically exclusive relationship. They both have friends outside that relationship, but those friends take less priority by default than this core relationship. Maybe these two people are living together, maybe not, but it's definitely a this one is the one type of situation. One of them realizes that this kind of thing isn't working for them anymore, and that deep down, they just want to burn down the whole structure of normative privilege and do a different thing. So with their copy of an Emma Goldman book clutched sweatily in their little hand, they go to their partner and they say, hey, partner, you can imagine that they're John Wayne if you want to. So you know how right now we only have sex with each other, and we only have romantic relationship content with each other, and we sleep in the same bed every night, and the structure of our relationship is such that we don't tend to have to contend with jealousy because this is a two-person deal, and exclusivity creates the illusion of safety. Well, I don't want that anymore. I want to do some of the things that I only do with you with other people. I want other people to have the opportunity to be as close and as intimate with me in many ways that you are. For someone who's not motivated towards this kind of change, that kind of statement can be devastating. It is very easy to interpret that desire to mean you are not special, or you are not enough for me to be satisfied, or all kinds of other super crushing, painful stuff. It is very, very difficult to have this conversation. I have been in relationships that have gone from monogamous to admittedly highly structured, permission-based, non-monogamous. And even with all of the bullshit rules and behaviors that a lot of polyamorous people tend to put in place to protect their feelings, it is a total fucking mess. There is a pessimistic part of me that wants to say that it just isn't possible. That if you are in a deeply entrenched monogamous relationship and only one of you has the desire to do the counter hierarchy dance, you're pretty screwed. In the sense that you're screwed in that this is not going to be easy for you or for anyone around you. And you might need to just scrap the whole relationship as it stands and move on, with the idea you could potentially build something new after time healing and getting counseling and working through that stuff. The reason for this is that it's a shift significant enough and unidirectional enough that it feels like it might not be possible to find that place together where you're both satisfied. All of the major relationship changes I have ever experienced in my life have either been possible because at some level we both wanted the same stuff and worked to make those changes together, or we just quit cold turkey. If one person still wants that mono life, it's going to be very, very difficult to reconcile. But then again, maybe the people you love and the people who love you are going to be able to go through this thing with you because they love you and not the relationship. And that shit is magic. Like really, seriously powerful shit. And honestly, I don't know that I've ever had the opportunity to really be there with a person before. And if you are, I envy you deeply. Those are the kinds of people that really, really matter in your life. The people that love you more than love their relationship with you. For me, the move to where I'm at now, in terms of the way that I structure my relationships, has been powerful and difficult. The process of shifting into this mental and emotional place has been such a deep and powerful sea change for me and everyone that I'm close to. People that I meet now all get to know how I operate. I have to be clear and upfront as I can about it. But like I said in the earlier question, that's part of communication is intimacy. I don't want to say it's not possible. But this is a big thing. Monogamy, couple centrism, heteronormativity, all of these things have massive, massive cultural and social weight. You are pushing a boulder up a hill while an eagle pecks at your liver. You know, the chances of you having that rock roll back down and crush you are very, very high. So you may want to just abandon the boulder altogether. But if you've got help, if there is someone at the top of that hill pulling on a rope, helping you get that boulder up there, maybe you can do it. There's going to be tears and there's going to be hurt feelings, and people are going to need to have powerful self-esteem to be able to get through this. You and the people close to you. It's tough. It's tough stuff. I want you to think about this not as how can I convince someone that I'm with to change the way that our relationship is, but about holding your truth to yourself, right? It's about you and the space that you want to fill in the world. And if the people that you are close to can trust their feelings for you and yours for them, and that you're willing to buy in to all the weird bullshit you're going to have to go through together, good luck. And I think you can, I want to hope you can do it. I guess the only real advice that I can offer here is be real with the people that are close to you. Recognize that change has a cost, but do not be afraid of that cost. Live your own life, be true to what feels right for you, and respect your own and other people's boundaries. Especially if those boundaries say, I can't do this. No more is often the hardest boundary for people to hear and to listen to. And if you say, this is what I want, and the people around you say, I can't do this, there is a point where you have to let go. Maybe you won't get to that point. It's daunting, but if this is your truth, you got to fight for it. Rocket Orca asks, as a non-monogamous person, I've had people who are monogamous or monogamish, which is a term. Rocket Orca, I'm not going to give you shit for this, but seriously, Dan Savage, come on, man. Hate that word. Blech. Anyway, I've had people who are monogamous want to try to establish a relationship with me, which is not always a deal breaker for me. I just know expectations may be skewed at first, and ultimately, I'm not going to be the one to change their mindset. So you can see the compare and contrast from the last question, right? One of the biggest hangups I've had with relationships centers around equality versus equity. I had a fun relationship where someone counted the time I would spend doing stuff with other people versus them. You've talked a lot about your time and how that gets spent with your relationships. I have my whole speech I give to people up front, but I'm interested in how you explain to someone the difference between equity and equality at the get-go. From Rocket Orca. Rocket Orca, I don't blame you. I understand some people identify as monogamish, which is whatever. Fine, you can. I'm never going to use that word to describe a relationship, but you can if you want to. Not you, them. Obviously, you don't want to either. Anyway, terminology. So this question is focused particularly on a topic that I think is fascinating and something that comes up a lot for me when I talk about relationship anarchy or non-monogamy. I've mentioned it before, but I'm really happy that Rocket Orca here has given me a way to really dig into the concept. We're going to talk about the difference between equity and equality. So when I say things like, I have a lot of different relationships that matter to me with all kinds of different contexts, work, friendship, romance, sex, they're all really important to me, these relationships. I try to treat people fairly and care about the people that I'm close to, regardless of the content of our relationship. I'm often asked about how I do that, about how I balance it. In what ways do I have to work to give everyone the same treatment? To which I can only say, I don't. Fairness is not about giving everyone the same thing. It's about not treating people differently because of the nature of the relationship. So the expectation, if you are aiming for equality, and a lot of people, when they hear fairness, they think equality, which in this context is the idea that everyone is treated precisely the same. So if you're aiming for equality, the idea here, or the expectation at least, is that every person, friend or colleague, lover, romantic partner, nesting or separate, old or new, gets the exact same stuff. If I was trying to focus on equality, I would treat someone that I just met with the exact same amount of affection and love that I do with someone I've known for a decade and who I love and have experienced all sorts of things with. Inversely, equality-oriented relationship practices try to protect existing relationships by limiting the intensity, time, or energy that is put into a new relationship. This is a pretty common defense tactic in a lot of forms of non-monogamy. Controlling behavior or exposure to downplay new relationship energy and to protect an existing relationship from feeling displaced. It is a status quo power control move. If my relationships were built on equality and not on equity, I would be timing myself, making sure I spend the exact same amount of time with each person. And I would need to design some sort of way to monitor and control my emotional investment in each relationship. A huge, huge red flag for me is when people in non-monogamous relationships say things like, you're not allowed to fall in love with this person. You can sleep with them, you can spend time with them, but you cannot love them. As fucking though, love were a thing that we could just turn on or off like an option in a menu. Equality in relationships is a very idealist sort of Soviet concept, right? Relationship Soviets. Everyone gets the same thing and we are all equals. Except that it's not at all a practical thing for relationships. The heart wants what it wants. And trying to pretend that we love someone more or less, or that we want something more or less than we actually wanted, is self-deception at best and destructive bullshit at worst. So what we ought to strive for instead is the concept of equity. The idea of giving each relationship what it needs to flourish and reach whatever potential it might have. To each relationship, according to its need, from me, according to my ability. Less Stalin or Marx. Or to use a more natural metaphor, I give the relationships that need more energy, more energy. You put the plants that like the sun out in the sun where the sun shines, and you water the ones that need lots of water more often. Acquaintances are treated with care and decency, with respect and attention, because they might want to grow into something new, and also because being decent to people is just like the right fucking thing to do. But they don't get the whole of my emotional spectrum by any means. Some older relationships are tended casually over time. We'll see each other once or twice a year to remind ourselves why we're friends, but they don't need that deep intensity. Other relationships might seize my attention, right? I might want to spend lots of time with someone. Maybe we have a shared activity I'm really into right now. Maybe we're having sex and it's a really nice thing we do together and we're feeling good about that. Maybe it's a big crush and we all feel butterflies and intensity right now and want to enjoy that. Maybe it's all of that stuff. Maybe there's a sense of external need. I'm going to spend more time and energy on loved ones who are sick or who need support. Or I'm going to spend more time and energy on people who are working with me on a significant project. Say, the cast of a new roleplay show. They get more of my time and energy. The idea here is that if you flatten the hierarchies of your relationships, they can't be built on the idea that all relationships inherently get to be the same value and stay that way. It's silly to think that we don't play favorites, but we have to give every relationship a chance to take the spotlight if that's what that relationship needs, and that's what everyone in the relationship wants. When Rocket Orca talks about the idea that a person that she's with might count the dates she has with other people, or complain that, well, you had lunch with them twice last week and only once with me. Where's my second lunch? What she's seeing is a pretty common reaction to jealousy or fear. This ties into the idea that the more special we are to someone, the more time they spend with us. A fundamental concept of non-monogamous thought is often phrased like love is a post-scarcity resource, or the heart is infinite. Meaning that the ephemera of emotion isn't a thing you can run out of, which in my experience has been true. In practice, most folks realize that while love is infinite, time is not. Or at least not to us humans down here on the material plane. Right? A person might love 100 people at once. I mean, not all at once. But the expression of that love often comes down to time spent. The easiest and clearest way for people who are anxious about the time they're getting to measure whether they're being treated equally is to count minutes. I can spend 2 hours with someone and it can be full and powerful couple of hours. I can spend a year straight with someone and have it be flat and dull and melancholy. But we're human beings. And we rely on our constructs of time to tell us things. And in this case, as with a lot of people in this situation, the response to someone we want more time from, spending that time with someone else, can be a demand of fair distribution based on numerical value. Which is silly. But what you asked was about how I handle this stuff. Because Jesus Christ, I am really fucking busy. See, I have this relationship with several thousand people, and I really care about that relationship. And I spend a lot of time actively engaged in that relationship with those several thousand people, you know, in batches of a couple hundred at a time. And when I'm not engaged directly in that relationship with them, I'm doing work preparing and building for that relationship. I'm making things for them because I care about and like those people. That relationship is really important to me, but it takes up a lot of time. And then on top of that, I have a lot of other important things that are happening in my life, other relationships. And so for me, I am a very busy person. And all relationships are, to me, a little bit of work, right? There's no relationship that feels like it recharges my batteries, even if it's a relationship I really love and care about. Like my relationship with you. Love and care about it, but y'all are work. Like you said, Rocket Orca, the thing here is to just be real with people. When I get to know someone, I tend to be nice and clear about what I have to offer, right? From me, according to my ability, and then build a space where that person can communicate what they want in a relationship to them, according to their need. And they do the same for me. And then we work out if a relationship is something that's possible. I will present a schedule of my time when I am available. And if that works for you, you'll tune in. Maybe we have other ways that we relate, right? There's Twitter, there's Discord. For real people, it's how much time do we spend eating meals together? How much time do we spend watching movies, playing board games? Are there things that we can do that are both productive work and quality time together? Overlapping is huge for me. If I have a relationship where I can work with the person, I can have an emotional connection with the person, and I can have fun being around them, I get to do a bunch of stuff that I love all at once. And all of this is just about building these structures together. And this is true of all my relationships, not just romantic or friendly ones, but work ones too. With my colleagues at Roll20, for example, I know and communicate what time and energy I have for projects. And we have a contract structure that outlines those things. It's a form of relationship. We've agreed that what our relationship is going to be about is dictated in this contract. And if either of us needs to change it, there are parameters to do that. With friends, it's more organic, but I don't tend to have friends whose need and ability don't match up, right, with what I have to offer and what I need. Now, I think that there's always room for change, right? I definitely make more space for people if I like them more, or if I want to pursue stuff. Projects will expand to need more room and then ebb away a bit. Everything changes all the time. Being clear and then committing to continued assessment is what matters. Trying your best to, in good faith, have conversations with people about what you can give and what you need. Having clear boundaries, but being flexible otherwise and open to possibility. Be real with folks and ask for them to do the same. If they need more than you can give, they need to change what they're happy with, or you need to change what you can give and make more space for them, or else the thing can just not be a relationship anymore. And that's okay too. Part of something like relationship anarchy is that it gives power to flexibility. You can choose not to have something and instead only have the things that matter to you. You're freed from the idea that something isn't good enough because it doesn't fit a mold. I can have intimate connections with people I see twice a year, and I can have constant contact with people who live far away, and it feels just as fulfilling as being right next to them because we've worked these things out together. The ability to craft our own rules according to everyone playing the game means we get better relationship experiences. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. As an aside, pursuant to this question, but not directly approaching it, equity versus equality is a really interesting concept in social justice circles, and absolutely worth more attention and research if you're curious. If you just Google equity versus equality, there's all kinds of really cool articles about, you'll see there's an image with a fence and some boxes. But yeah, absolutely worth looking into more. So thank you, Rocket Orca, for giving me an opportunity to ramble about that. This has been the 6th episode of Office Hours. That's it for today. Thank you for coming, everybody. And thank you to our guests for submitting your questions. If you want to get involved in this strange write-in relationship advice show that might also be about role-playing games, you can go to www.adam-koebel.com, click on the Hot for Teacher link, and fill out the form. I would love to answer your question on the air when I get to it. 3 at a time, I know is a little slow, but we're going to keep at it. I hope that even if I didn't answer your question particularly, I answered a question that was useful to you, or at least made you think. So thanks for coming, and we will see you next week for more Hot for Teacher. Bye, everybody.